Welcome to our second Live Well Kids Garden lesson of the year, planting in the cool season. Basically, when we plant our vegetable gardens, we plant in two different seasons, the warm season and the cool season. In the warm season, we plant seeds that need to thrive and grow over the warm months of the year. So we plant them in the spring and they grow through the summer. But in the cool season, we plant seeds that thrive in the cool weather. So we plant them in the fall and they grow over the winter, and then we pick them in the spring. Since it's fall, we're going to plant some cool season vegetables right now. Here are all the supplies we need to plant in this garden bed today. I've got my compost. This is to amend the soil. I've got my cultivator. This is to break up the soil that's been compacted over time from the last planting. I have my trowel that we use to dig out any old roots or plant parts that were left in there from before. I have a ruler, so when we're ready to plant our seeds and make rows, we can measure the distance. I have my seed packets. Today we're going to plant beets and Swiss chard. And I have labels so that we know what we planted. We might forget. And I have a Sharpie so we can write on there what the name of the plant is and the date we planted it. I also brought a piece of twine because sometimes when we want to make sure that our row is nice and straight, we can lay that down and plant our seeds along it so that the row doesn't go all crazy curvy like that. I have a watering can with a sprinkle top on it. And I'm kneeling on a pad, but I brought one here to show you. You might want to kneel on a pad so that it's not so hard on your knees if you're on the ground for a while. To prepare this garden bed for planting, we had to remove all the old plants out of here first. And I'm just going to show you, when you take your plants out and you've got all these roots sometimes get left in the soil, so you need to also dig around in there and get all of these out. But look here, all this soil that's around these roots is full of little microbes that are helping the plant bring nutrients to the plant. So we want to leave all of this soil in there. We don't want to throw this out, right? So you try to really rub and get all the soil to stay in the bed as much as you can. We've removed the plants and then we've cultivated and aerated the soil. By using a cultivator, we break up all the soil after the plants have come out. You break this all up because it's been compacted over time with the old plants in there and watering and just settling. That allows water to move through, worms and things to move through those air spaces. Okay. That's why we cultivate it. We also amend the soil. We put the compost in, and I've already done this, but I'm just going to show you how to do it. You're going to put your compost in, but you're going to do it throughout the whole bed. So when you mix it up, you're going to incorporate the compost all the way down as deep as you can and get it as thoroughly incorporated into the soil as possible, because you want to distribute these nutrients throughout the soil. The last plants that grew in here took a lot of those nutrients up in their roots to make themselves healthy and nutrient rich. They pull the nutrients out of the soil. So now the soil is depleted. So we put nutrients back in, mix it in really well into the soil so that we plant new seeds. Those new seeds, when they sprout into plants, those plants will be able to have these nutrients to nourish themselves with. So once it's all mixed in, we're going to level it out, because you don't want to drop seeds in when you have the soil all rocky and bumpy like that, right? So we kind of rake it level, make it one level. Now we're going to plant our seeds. We've got the beets and we've got Swiss chard. Each plant has its own rules for being planted. These two plants are pretty similar. They both want to be planted a ½ inch deep. When you read the back of the seed packet, it tells you how deep to plant the plants, how far apart to space each seed, and how far apart to space one row of seeds from the next row of seeds. Sometimes you'll have a plant that's teeny tiny, like lettuce or carrots, and they only want to be planted a ½ inch deep. Or you might have a plant that's big and fat, like a pea or a pumpkin seed, and they want to be planted a whole inch deep. So you really need to read them. It's really important to plant your seed at the right depth, because if you don't, it probably won't sprout. So I'm going to see a ½ inch is how deep we had to plant it. I'm going to show you on my finger. A ½ inch is right there, halfway through the first section of my finger. So before the bend, from the tip to the bend, it's halfway through. And when you push it in, I'm pushing it in just to that 1/2 inch spot. And then I know I'm at the right depth. So every time I put my finger in, I'm going to push it in the same amount. So I can consistently make 1/2 inch holes. When you've made your decision about what you're going to plant, make sure you learn a little bit about that plant, because if you're planting something really tall like peas in the same bed as something really short like lettuce, you want to place them in the bed so that the lettuce can see the sun. For example, if your sun is over there most of the day and moving across the sky back there and not over there, you want your shorter plant, like your lettuce, on this side of the bed so that it can always receive sun. If you plant the peas on this side and the lettuce on that side and your sun's over there, the peas are going to eventually grow tall enough that they'll block the sun for the lettuce. So just make sure that you understand how big and what your growing habits are of your plant and how big it's going to eventually get. Same thing goes for girth. That means how wide around. If you're growing an onion, it's going to grow tall and skinny. If you're growing something really bushy like a vining plant, like a big squash plant, you want to understand that it's going to take up a lot of room and sprawl all over. So you want to make sure that you're not planting them right next to each other in the bed. You want to make sure you give them plenty of room. If you have something tall and skinny like onions, you can plant them closer together. Okay, so we've got 2 seed packets. I'm going to show you how to start planting in your first row. I'm going to use this guideline just to show you how. I'm going to move in a little bit from the edge here. And one trick that we like to do when we plant in the school gardens is we have these irrigation lines and the water just drips out of there. So we usually try to plant the seeds right up next to it so they get that water directly instead of way over here and hoping the water travels to them. So I'm going to take a couple seeds out. We already saw that the plant depth was a 1/2 inch and the seed spacing is every 4 inches. So just to know, 4 inches is here, so on myself, that's down to my knuckle. So this is how I do it. We're going to do I know how we're 1/2 inches, we're going to do 1/2 inch there, and I'm going to put my seed in. I'm going to pinch it closed, and I'm going to do a finger spacing right to my knuckle where I measured 4 inches away, which is where this little flower is, dead flower. And I'm going to do the same 1/2 inch hole and drop this seed in and pinch it closed, and I'm going to move down the row like that. After you've planted your whole row, you want to make sure that you put a label on. You could put one on both ends, you could put one on one end, but you want to write a label. I wrote beets, and I wrote today's date, and I'm going to put it in the end. We're going to put that there in the corner. We'll always know what's in this row as we water them, and as they grow. In the beginning, we might not be able to remember that there are seeds there because you'll see nothing until they sprout. And then when they sprout, if you've planted a lot of seeds and a lot of rows of seeds in different beds, you might come back and say, what was here? So this is really helpful to know what we planted. The reason we put the date is because sometimes nothing sprouts and 3 weeks go by and you're thinking, shouldn't something have sprouted by now? So if you check the date and you look at the back of the seed packet tells you when it should have sprouted. And if it should have sprouted already, maybe there's a problem. Maybe the seeds are old. Maybe they'd gotten wet. So before we planted them. So we'll plant new seeds if we see that seeds didn't sprout. And that's really helpful to have the date there so you can know if you need to do it over again instead of just waiting and waiting and waiting. Once your first row is planted and you're ready to plant a second row, this packet said that the row should be 12 inches apart. So I measure here, there's 12 inches. And I'm going to move this here. And we're going to repeat the same process 12 inches away from the first row along this line. Now that your seeds are all planted, it's time to water them. Watering the seeds will make them sprout open and start growing. I'm going to show you what not to use. We don't use a watering can like this with brand new seeds, because when the water comes out of this kind of a hole, it's like a finger pointing in the ground, and it pushes hard in one spot and it'll press those seeds out of place. We carefully measured the depth, right? So we want them to stay in place. That will push them around. Same thing with a hose. If you do a hose, like a streaming hose pressing hard, they don't have any roots yet, so they can't hold themselves in place. So we use a sprinkle top, and that kind of simulates rain, and it waters them very gently, see, without pushing them around. Also, you want to make sure when you're watering them with a sprinkle top that you don't just hold it in one place and soak them, because that little flood there will also make them float around and out of place. So you're just going to gently go back and forth, right, in all of your rows. And you're going to soak them really well. Just soak them. You don't soak them in one spot. You're going to soak them by just going over and over and over and over for the first time. And then you're going to come out and soak them again the next day and the next day, and then you're going to skip a couple days. So for the first 3 days, you just want to water them real thoroughly every day, and then you're going to skip to every other day. Once they sprout, then you can go on to a schedule of every 2 to 3 or 4 days, depending on how hot and dry your climate has become. The hotter the days, the more often they need watering. If you have a drip irrigation system on a timer like this, you can just set your timer. Thank you for joining us for our second Live Well Kids garden lesson of the year, planting in the cool season. Join us next time when we talk about compost, soil building, and worm farms. Bye-bye.